Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I am your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very senior professional from the film business in the USA, from Hollywood, currently from Miami, USA, Mr. Massimo Martinotti. Massimo, welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much for having me today.
Thank you. Massimo is the Chief Executive Officer of Starlight Effect. He's the president of the Florida Film Producers Association, and in his own words, he's a story chaser. So, Massimo, you wanted to be a film director from the time you were a teenager. Tell me about your journey in brief.
Yes. Well, I live in the US. I've been living here for the last 25 years, but I was born in Italy in a very small town in the northern part of the country. So being a film director seemed to look pretty much a very long shot. But I made it. I was able to direct and produce commercials in over 30 countries for large brands, Procter & Gamble, Toyota, Ford, Chrysler, McDonald's. I had a very lucky life in that sense. I've been able to produce very spectacular projects all around the world. But like 10 years ago, I realized that just focusing on the marketing and communications aspect of needs of our clients was not enough. I realized that what I was doing was basically producing tactical stories, commercials. Commercials are very short-lived. You produce a commercial, it goes on air, 2 weeks later, it's all story. And I thought that I had to refocus my attention into telling strategic stories, stories that allow clients to operate all their aspects. I mean, not only marketing, but also innovation, corporate culture, change management, sustainability. And we began thinking how to use stories to in a holistic way, not just for specific marketing.
Yeah, well said. You also call yourself a story chaser. Help me understand this phrase and give me an example.
Yeah, we are story chaser because we help our clients to bring to light stories that are already there. We don't craft, invent, fabricate stories. That never works. We are like archaeologists. We dig and we try to unearth stories that are already there that can be used by our clients to define who they are and then encapsulate all what they do, what they really are, into a coherent story that can help them represent their brand and achieve basically their goals. So we are not fabricating stories. We are finding stories that are already there, but probably not very visible, perhaps. Sometimes are hidden, but they are there or could be there. So that's why we are chasing story, not fabricating story.
Very interesting, and I love the phrase story chaser. I had not heard this before. So tell me, Massimo, what are some of the basic elements of a story, and why are these elements so important?
Stories have been around forever. People began telling stories probably 70, 80,000 years ago. And it happened in a moment when people, we probably were living in Africa, but at that moment, It happened at the moment when people began to being able to give names to invisible things. Until that moment, it was very easy for humans to name, I don't know, a cow, a tree, a mountain, a cloud. At that moment, they acquired the ability to give names to invisible and intangible things. So they began to be able to talk about love, friendship, honor, and it's a great shift. At that moment, they were able to sit around the campfire and tell stories. At the very beginning, story was not meant to be entertainment. They were basically used to share values, to make sense of natural phenomena. They were used to create communities and to establish leadership. Nowadays, people use story basically for the same reason. But what are the basic elements of a story? There are many elements, ingredients of a story, but just to mention a couple of them. The most important stuff is archetypes and plots. Archetypes, there are like 250 archetypes organized in 20 different families. At least we use that structure. Archetype define who you are or who your brand is. Archetype are static. They define who you are. Plots, on the other hand, that are only 30, define where you go. They are more dynamic, where the brand of the organization is going. So to craft a proper story, you need to basically tell the thing, who you are and where you are going.
Correct.
Because a story at the end is an invitation to a journey. I mean, when you tell a story to your employees, to your clients, to your consumer, whoever your audience might be, you're basically inviting those people to travel with you somewhere. And to achieve that, you need to tell the thing, who you are and where you're going. That's basically the two elements. For clients, we have realized that using archetypes and plot is extremely powerful because it's the power of naming. When you are able to put a name to define your organization, name an archetype and a plot, and even to name the emotions that your brand can or desire to produce in different audiences, this element becomes real because names give you the capacity to understand and to communicate properly.
Well said.
Who you are and where you're
going. Very interesting.
That's basically.
So, from the time when you came to the US 25 years ago, when you were making films, to today, technology has changed dramatically. From the big screen to the television to now the small handheld phone that everyone carries. Based on your own experience, how has storytelling changed based on the format that is coming out and in the time?
Stories are agnostic in terms of platform. A story is a story. Of course, story goes where technology is. 70,000 years ago, a story was, people told story sitting around the campfire. And that happened for millennia. Then people began writing stories. The new technology was writing. Then the technology of paper, printing. So story went there. And that happened for many centuries. Then, television, radio, movies, Netflix,
Mm.
handheld. But the story is a story. If you, I give you an example.
Yeah.
If you read the Iliad, which is a Greek epic poem, the main character is Achilles. Achilles is a hero, almost invulnerable. His only weakness is the heel, because his mother, she was a goddess, a nymph, put him into the water of a sacred river to make him immortal. But since she held the baby by the foot, that's the only part of the body which is not which is vulnerable.
Yeah.
So if you look, that character was created 4,000 years ago.
Right.
Superman is exactly the same character.
Yes.
So 4,000 years have passed, but the story is the same. So stories don't change. And the proof of this is that we have been working for many years in multicultural markets. We have worked, for instance, in Europe, telling stories in several countries for the same brand. In Spanish, in French, in Italian, in Greek, and in German. But the story was basically the same. And in the US, we have been working in the multicultural market, where you have Asian American, Latin American, Hispanic American, Afro American, large communities.
Yeah.
But the stories are very similar. Actually, the same archetypes and the same plots have been used all across the globe. And we have seen that there are strong similarities, for instance, between the Greek and Roman epic poems and the Indian epic poem. There are certain similarities in the structure of the story and even in the characters.
Well said. So moving on, Massimo, now, you also done a lot of work with the corporate world in America and around the world. Why do business leaders and corporations need to find, craft, and tell the right story?
Yeah. I tell you, the best way is to tell you why they call us. Why companies call us. And it doesn't matter if it is a large multinational corporation like Nestlé, or a large regional company that operates in several countries, or a small foundation or a small startup, or even a country that needs to tell a story to attract investors and visitors. They call us basically for a certain amount of reason, which is to define who they are, because very often we have discovered that most of our clients tend to define themselves in terms of category, not in terms of brand. So they tell the same story of a category. So but doing so, they cannot differentiate themselves from their competitors.
Right.
The second reason why they call us more frequently is to communicate more efficiently and connect the brand with emotions. Most of the marketing technologies are based on the logic. Even most of the research technology, even if they supposed to be focused on emotion, are most focused on the logic aspect of things. So very often clients need to connect their brand to emotions. Clients call us because they need to sell or buy. They need to attract the right talent and the right investors, they need to create a powerful corporate culture. They need to differentiate their brands from competitors. Very often they need to, they are facing hard to crack challenges that are not easily solved using traditional business and marketing tools. That's why we normally come before an advertising agency or a strategic planning team. We craft a story that feeds the work of a creative agency, a public relation office, or
very interesting.
Any other consulting
fascinating
company.
And you also say, when I was reading about you, you also say that leaders can move storytelling to the core of the strategy of the organization and use it to generate growth, stay relevant in the era of transformation, and connect with all shareholders. What is the connection that you are seeing between story and strategy?
Two things. I mean, business leaders need to realize that stories are not only for marketing purposes. Very often when we go in a client, they think that stories are for marketing purposes. And we say, no, you have to put the story at the center of your strategy. And why this happens? Because a story and a strategy are the same thing. A story is a journey of a hero from point A to point B. A strategy is a journey of a corporation, an organization, brand from point A from B. They are synonymous. When a client finds the right story, when we help a client to find the right story, he gets also the strategy. Of course, that story and that strategy had to be adapted to very different things. When we build this story strategy, then has to be used by the marketing department, but also by the human resources marketing department, by the reputation department. But story and strategy means the same thing.
So are you saying that leaders need to be good storytellers?
Oh, yeah. I think that it's something that if you're not a good storyteller, leaders and brands, if you don't tell the right story, it will be very difficult for you to achieve your goals, because you don't differentiate your marketing, your brand, or yourself from the competitors. The audience don't understand very well who you are, where you're going. So telling the right story is basically a must. For that will invest a lot of time in training our clients in the use of stories, and not only the leadership president and the CEO and the leadership, but also all the levels of the company have to be transformed into storytellers.
And what is the methodology you follow to construct a story for a brand or for an individual?
Yeah, what we think that building a story for a brand cannot be just a spark of creativity. I mean, it's not just we had a good idea, and that's a nice story. We do it. We have a methodology which is at the same time solid and replicable. We work in three phases. The first phase, we call it enigma. If you remember, during the Second World War, Germany had a machine called Enigma to code their messages. So the British and the Americans and the Allies were able to read the messages, but they were in code. So they were unable to understand what they actually meant. The stories are there. In the first phase, we crack the code. We trying to do that with different techniques. We revise all available documents, marketing, research documents, all information regarding the ambience in the company. Then we speak with people. We have a conversation with the leaders. We have a conversation with employees. We have a conversation with clients. So we try to crack the code and understand what the story would be. When we have done that and the enigma part, we go into a second step that we call epiphany. We try to produce an eureka moment when the client realizes that that's the story they need. It's a story at the same time powerful, but also a story they can leave, because a story, you don't tell a story, you leave a story. And the third part of our process is what we call transformation, which is the phase in which you transform yourself and your company according to the new narrative. And it is a very interesting process, because transformation normally begins to understanding what story that have been at the core of your organization for decades and time are counterproductive. And you have to leave behind, and you have to adjust. You have to embrace a new narrative, and that implies that you have to change. You have to transform the way you do things. You have to transform how you communicate. You have to transform even your portfolio products. And very often at the end of our process, we recommend the client to extend their line of products, or we recommend them to enter new categories, or we recommend new business models that fit better the new story. So these are the three phases: enigma,
epiphany,
and transformation.
Fantastic. And my last question to you, Massimo, and this is a question for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. A lot of them are very young viewers and listeners. Based on your own amazing journey as a director, as a story chaser, what would you say are 3 lessons you want our viewers and listeners to take away from your own life's journey?
Well, first of all, I think that it is important for business leaders, or large companies, small companies, startups, whatever, that people don't buy your products. People don't invest in your company. People don't work for you. They share your story. If you don't understand that, you cannot think of your employees or your customers or your clients as such. You have to think them as co-storyteller. They share your story. The second point that I would like to point out is that the best story always wins. So you need to craft the best story. And in that sense, it's important for you to understand what stories your competitors are telling. it's an interesting process to understand what our competitors are telling. We need to tell a better story. And the last thing is that stories, as I mentioned that before, you don't tell a story, you live a story. So when you craft a story for your company, it's not just, it shouldn't be just a nice narrative. It should be something you can live, that your employees can live, that your clients understand, that your consumer understand, and that your consumer and client won't be part of.
How interesting.
So these are basically the three.
How fascinating. And on that note, Massimo, and your three wonderful lessons, I think each one of them is so powerful, and I'm sure I could have a half an hour conversation on each. First one you said was that business leaders must understand that people don't buy your products, they don't buy your company, they don't buy your share, people share your story. Second one, you said the best story always wins, and therefore it is very important for us to understand competition. And the third one was that we must all leave a story and not tell a story. Thank you so much for talking to me about your journey, about your journey as a story chaser. Thank you for talking to me about the components of a story, which you said which included enigma and epiphany. And thank you also for telling me and making me understand how important a story and a strategy is the same. There's no difference between them. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you so very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.